Sugata Bose and Professor Dr. Raja Razia, our moderator for this evening, to please be on stage. Your seats are there. Namaskar, Namaskaram, Salam Hormat. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sri Kala Nambiar and I'll be taking you through this evening's event. On behalf of the Asia-Europe Institute, University Malaya, and the Malaysia-India Heritage Society, let me extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you here to this public lecture on Asia after Europe in the first session, and what do Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose's political and socio-cultural beliefs mean for multi-ethnic societies in the second session. We are indeed very honored and privileged to have with us the eminent Professor Dr. Sugata Bose as our guest speaker, and our very own renowned distinguished Professor Dr. Raja Razia as the moderator for both topics. Round of applause, you can clap now. Thank you. Not that these two gentlemen need any introduction, nevertheless I have a job to do. Professor Dr. Sugata Bose comes with all things Netaji readily embedded in his DNA by virtue of being Netaji's grandnephew. He is the first Asian to be appointed to the prestigious Gardner Chair of Oceanic History and Affairs at Harvard University in 2001, the previous two being historians of the West. Among his many accomplishments, he was recipient of the coveted Guggenheim Fellowship in 1997. His publications range from his domains of expertise, that is, modern South Asian and Indian Ocean history, dynamics of political economy, culture and social change, nationalism, capitalism, colonialism, or rather empire as he prefers to often put it, to Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, and Netaji. I'm quite sure the latest of his many books and publications, titled Asia After Europe, Decline and Rise of a Continent, will be part of his lecture today. Ladies and gentlemen, on a side note, I'm indeed delighted to warmly welcome the gracious presence of our learned professor's brother, Professor Sumatra Bose, Professor Dr. Sumatra Bose, a political scientist and professor at the London School of Economics. Thank you, Prof. Our moderator for today's lecture is none other than Professor Dr. Raja Razia, Distinguished Professor of Economics and Executive Director at the Asia-Europe Institute of University Malaya. Hailed as one of the top authorities in government, economic and industrial policies in the region, he is a recipient of numerous Malaysian and international awards. In a summary of summaries of the illustrious Professor's Star-Spangled CV available online, which, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, quite a daunting task for me, the multifaceted maestro of academia earned his doctorate in economics from Cambridge University and was a Rajawali Fellow at Harvard University. He is a recipient of the Celso Furtado Prize from the World Academy of Sciences for advancing the frontiers of social science thought in economics. This global pioneer in the economics of innovation and development is also a recipient of the Merdeka Award for Scholastic Achievement. Now a round of applause, please. Ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture is organized jointly by the Asia-Europe Institute of University Malaya and the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. The latter, which was founded in 2017 by its current president, Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, under the auspices of the Indian High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, an ex-director of the National Hero Center within the National Archives of Malaysia, is also an author, social scientist, a research consultant in the Parliament of Malaysia, and an avid historian, to name a few. To brief us on the Malaysia-India Heritage Society's objectives and to put it into context with our lectures today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to call upon its founder president, Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, to address us.
Distinguished Professor Dr. Raja Rasaya, Head of Asia Europe Institute, University Malaya, Professor Dr. Sugata Bose, our chief guest today, Professor Dr. Sugata Bose, Director of Netaji Research Bureau, Calcutta, His Excellency Mr. Dr. B.L. Kandan, Tan Sri Palan, Mr. Raj Pandey, representative of the Thai Bharat Cultural Lodge, Bangkok, members of the Netaji Foundation, especially Mr. Subhanarayana Swami, INA veteran, and the president of Netaji Foundation, Mr. Radhakrishnan, members of the Malaysia-India Heritage Society and Group, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Malaysia-India Heritage Society is privileged indeed to join hands with the Asia Europe Institute of the University of Malaya in organizing today's program, occasioned by the visit of Professor Sugata Bose and his brother, Professor Dr. Sumatra Bose, to Singapore. My thanks to our dear members, His Excellency Mr. Keshwapani from Singapore, as well as Mr. B.L. Kandan, for ensuring that we, in neighboring Malaysia, do not miss out on the opportunity to host our distinguished scholar in Malaysia. Today's event is divided into two parts, of which the first part delves into Pan-Asianism as a compelling alternative to Western dominance, a topic that aligns closely with the objectives of the Asia Europe Institute. The second part will be on the legacy of openness left behind by Subhas Bose, who is none other than the grand-uncle of Professor Sugata Bose. Both subjects resonate with our objective of forging a shared historical narrative between Malaysia and India. The first lecture relates to us in the sense that Professor Sugata will stand forth in the distinguished line of intellectuals and activists from Bengal who have articulated their views on Pan-Asianism on Malayan soil. The first was Rabindranath Tagore, who graced our shores nearly 100 years ago. Tagore, an icon of the Pan-Asian movement, presented Pan-Asianism as a remedy for the moral failings of Western civilization. In 1961, Tunku Abdul Rahman, our first Prime Minister, commemorated Tagore's centenary, stating, "The greatness of Tagore is not confined to India. He belongs to Asia and the world." Tagore championed cultural rapprochement between communities, societies, and nations long before it became a global norm. Tagore's vision finds expression in one of the core beliefs of the Malaysia-India Heritage Society, that cultural diplomacy is an avenue for bridging nations together in peace and harmony on the road to world peace. Much had changed between the time of Tagore's visit to Malaya and the outbreak of World War II. During the war, two sons of Bengal, Rash Behari Bose and Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, arrived in Malaya to fight for Indian independence, and in the process supported the ideal of Asia for the Asians and East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Their primary motivation, however, was the liberation of India from British rule. Ladies and gentlemen, the subject of Pan-Asianism did not end there. It continued to be given serious consideration by independent India, which recognized Asian solidarity for the potential it held for world peace. Nehru took the lead in organizing the Asian Relations Conference in New Delhi, which was attended by a number of Malaysians who had the last opportunity to meet Mahatma Gandhi before his assassination in the following year. Friends, we would be remiss if we didn't take the opportunity of Professor Sugata's visit to address the profound impact Netaji has had on the hearts and minds of the people of this country. Thus, as mentioned, we have included a second segment to this program where Professor Sugata will deliver a compelling and authoritative discussion on his grand-uncle or his great-uncle, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Drawing from extensive research and personal insights, Professor Sugata will illuminate Netaji's ideals and vision, often diverging from politically influenced narratives, to highlight Netaji's advocacy for secularism and communal harmony among diverse ethnic and religious groups. Thank you, and please enjoy the lectures.
Thank you, Mr. Prabha. I'd now like to call upon Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers, Deputy Executive Director of Development, Research and Innovation at the Asia-Europe Institute, University of Malaya, to do the introduction to the first session.
Salam Sejahtera and Namaste to our Honorable Speaker, Professor Dr. Sugata Bose, Distinguished Professor Dr. Raja Rasya, Executive Director and Moderator for this afternoon session. On behalf of the Asia-Europe Institute, University Malaya, I would like to welcome each and every one of you today for the public lecture. We are indeed very fortunate to have Professor Sugata Bose with us to address on the topic of Asia after Europe and what Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose political and social-cultural belief mean for multi-ethnic society. I won't go further in that because Prof will be addressing on the issue. I'm sure you all come for his talk, so I will not go more than that. Asia-Europe Institute, or the AEI, has been in existence for more than 20 years. It offers postgraduate programs, including PhD, Masters in ASEAN Studies, and Masters in European Studies. In recent years, AEI has hosted eminent speakers and ambassadorial public lectures, such as we had the Ambassador of Spain, South Africa, to name a few, and today we have the very honorable, or we are indeed very honored to have Professor Dr. Sugata. Again, on behalf of the Asia-Europe Institute, I would like to welcome you, and for all those who have taken time and sacrificed your Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening for this lecture. I'm sure you will not regret and you will benefit a lot from that. So, thank you very much. Terima kasih. Dhanyawad. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I was going to be introduced. Professor Sugata Bose, Deputy Director of EEI, Dr. Anthony Rogers, Mr. Prabhakaran, the Honorable Prabhakaran, who is the President of the Malaysia India Heritage Countries, Dato, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you will hear the thunder as I return to sit beside him afterwards. I just thought of locating his speech. It's not going to take that long. He's actually among speakers. I just want to speak for 30 minutes to hear, really, to see what you are expecting of him. So we're expecting more questions. But the first lecture, and I'll focus on that for the moment now, will touch on his book, Asia After Europe. The lecture offers Sugata Bose interpretation of the changing balance of global power over the long 20th century between Asia and Euro-America. In the discussion, you will also see America, opting to glean the spatial and temporal shape of Asia as a connected zone, which is a history of intellectual, cultural, and political conversations across Asia, imagining in the process a polarized continentalism against the backdrop of phases of material poverty and prosperity. It provides a fresh perspective on Asianism targeted at those who challenge European colonialism and those who dream about the future of that, which is post-colonialism. I just wanted to extend a few lines there. It's a bit like, as these countries were facing, especially Asia, and since it's focused on Asia, independence, we saw the emergence of the Cold War, bipolar political system in which there were two big powers and their allies. But what came out in 1991, when Gorbachev decided to come across a very blunt, frank statement that the experiment failed, while not acknowledging that the capitalist world had succeeded. In fact, I was at Cambridge listening to Mandela and him speaking on BBC. But my own impressions are that he stuck to his promise that Warsaw Pact will end in 91, and the dismantling of the Soviet economic system will also ensue from that. You can actually look at the book by Michael Elman and Vladimir Kantorovich. The book talks about the disintegration of the Soviet economic system. The first one I read, Michael Elman's book, 92, and of course the revised version in Revelation 98. But what we're seeing now is an extension without a recognition of what Mandela thought would happen. Mandela, after being released from prison, had the courage and the intelligence to make a point, unless we have a more egalitarian world, this is not going to end there. He made it very blunt in the BBC. And what opportunity that Gorbachev started with was all undermined, and we have this famous book, The End of History, by Francis Fukuyama, talking about a triumphalist capitalist society that's going to dominate the world. But what we see now is the emergence of China and the attempt by the hegemony to contain China, and of course the problems we're facing with Russia. And at the same time, we are not only seeing a powerful China that managed to take out 700 million people from 1978, the economic reform that was undertaken during Deng Xiaoping. Started from there. Until 2022, they have already lifted some unprecedented in history. And then, of course, the emergence of India. So, without taking much of the thunder from, of course, the globally renowned Professor Sugata Bose, I shall now call upon the physical slides to show to present his talk. Thank you.
Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, Professor Raja Rasaya, Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, Professor Anthony Rogers, Ambassador Kesavpani, distinguished guests. I'm delighted to be here at the Asia-Europe Institute and to be hosted both by you, Professor Rasaya, and the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. And I'm truly thankful to my very dear friend, Ambassador Kesavpani, for making sure that I could revisit Malaysia after a gap of many years. I have been speaking about my new book, Asia After Europe, at several venues in America, Europe, and Asia. But I haven't yet spoken at a more appropriately named institute. It's a true delight to be able to speak on Asia After Europe at the Asia-Europe Institute here in Malaysia. I will try to give you a visual evocation of Asia After Europe. The book actually has quite a lot of economic history and discussion of political economy, but I'm going to slightly disappoint Professor Rasaya by focusing on the artistic and the cultural and the political, at least in my opening remarks. I would be happy to answer questions about the changing economic global balance of power as well. This is a book which narrates and interprets the creative process of imagining Asia by tracking the intersecting journeys of Asian intellectuals, artists, and anti-colonial activists during the long 20th century, by which I mean a period from the 1880s all the way to the present. In the year 1903, Abanindranath Tagore, a nephew of the poet Rabindranath, who has already been mentioned, removed a huge European oil painting from the wall of his studio and sold it to a wealthy art collector. He did this in order to make space for an Asian work of art to be executed by Yokoyama Taikan, who had followed Okakura Tenshin's trail to India. The chosen theme was Rash Leela, the love play of Radha and Krishna on a moonlit night. Within a few days, Taikan had completed his painting, but he was not satisfied. He kept saying that something is missing. One day, he arrived at the Tagore mansion and saw that the women had collected shuli, a white autumnal flower, and the breeze had blown the flowers all across the room. Taikan collected all the flowers, sprinkled them on his canvas in great delight, and then he took one flower, looked at it very closely, and then began applying the white and orange colors. Soon the painting came alive with a rain of flowers from the sky. He made sure that he put a shuli garland around Radha's neck. He curled the flowers around Krishna's flute as well. And then he framed the painting with a Baluchari sari border. Then the painting was put up on the wall and a party was thrown for friends to come and enjoy Rash Leela. So this was the painting. The original seems to be lost, but I found a very high quality reproduction in an early 20th century art journal called Rupam. The process of mutual understanding and learning through artistic conversations across Asia unfolded gradually. Yokoyama Taikan and Ishida Shunso embraced Indian themes in their works. Taikan painted the goddess Kali and Ishida Shunso painted Saraswati. And these paintings were bought by Rabindranath's sister, Swarnakumari Devi. Both were adorned with lotuses, which you can see at the bottom of this painting of Saraswati. Having observed Taikan soak his paintings in water, Abanindranath took the plunge himself and was impressed with the beautiful effect it had on his canvas. From that moment onwards, the Japanese wash became an intrinsic element in Indian painting. In 1905, Abanindranath painted an arresting image of the mother nation in that style, which was initially titled Bongo Mata, Mother Bengal, but later retitled as a gift to the Indian nation as a whole as Bharat Mata. So as you can see, this is a quintessentially Swadeshi, own country image, but it has absorbed an influence from outside, another part of Asia. Now, if the links of the Swadeshi era of 1905 were primarily cultural, suffused with an anti-colonial spirit, World War I afforded the opportunity for youthful daring on both intellectual and political planes. There was a fascinating young scholar from Bengal, Binoy Kumar Sarkar, who travelled through Southeast Asia and spent nearly 15 months in East Asia, in both Japan and China. And he wrote detailed travelogues in that period. He had met the Japanese scholar of Buddhism, Masaharu Anesaki, at Harvard. He was from Tokyo Imperial University. In Japan, he met Hattori Unokichi, a scholar of Chinese philosophy and literature, who had spent time at Beda, Peking University, and was poised to come to Harvard in place of Anesaki. Sarkar wondered in his travelogue whether the plans of a professor of philosophy at Harvard called James Morton Woods of bringing professors from India to Harvard would ever materialize. And of course, it had to wait for quite a few decades for that to happen. In August 1915, after spending several months in Japan, Binoy Sarkar mused, "What have I seen in Japan?" His reflections in answer to that question underscore a dramatic contrast between his travel experiences in Asia and Euro-America. In England and America, I understood the language of the people. I could converse with them in their mother tongue. Yet I felt oddly out of place. Kachhara was the Bengali word used in those societies. I have not understood the language of the men and women of Japan, yet standing on any street, in any city or village, I have felt as if I have been watching the scenes of Calcutta. In its heart and mind, Japan is a part of Asia. It has only imported some scraps of iron from Euro-America. Now, it was this feeling oddly out of place in Euro-America that was depicted in Florine Stettheimer's oil painting, Studio Party. In it, you see Binoy Sarkar is placed as an exotic fig leaf in front of Florine's self-portrait on the wall of a studio in New York. The intellectual engagement with Euro-America and the affective bond with Asia represented distinct modes of internationalist belonging of a colonized Indian intent on shaping a global future. He wrote a book which was titled The Futurism of Young Asia. Even more fascinating was what Binoy Sarkar had to say in his book dedicated to Kang Yu Wei and Liang Qiqiao about Chinese Muslims and the role of Islam in undergirding Asian unity. Okakura had theorized in 1903 about the Buddhist arc that connected Asia. Sharkar was fascinated to meet Muslims in China, coming from Bengal, a district which had almost an equal population of Hindus and Muslims. And he wrote, "The music that sprang from my heart strings as soon as I encountered Muslims here, why did it not sound on the same strings when I met the Chinese and Japanese Buddhist worshippers of Shakushinko?" And then he had a lyrical passage about the intimacy of Hindus and Muslims in Bengal. And of course, he made a powerful case for Hindu-Muslim unity in the cause of India's freedom. The 1920s witnessed the interplay of multiple universalisms in an age of mass nationalism. Asian nationalisms, including Indian nationalism, were never fully territorially bounded. So there were connections that were forged with Islamic universalism, the Khilafat movement during Gandhi's non-cooperation, the Bolshevik internationalism of Lenin post-1917. But Asia was one expansive venue for the play of what I call colorful cosmopolitanisms, a kind of cosmopolitanism which was not antithetical to patriotism. You could love your own country, but you could also forge cultural connections with others. In 1924, exactly 100 years ago, Rabindranath Tagore traveled through Southeast Asia to China and Japan. He had made his first voyage in 1916. In those days, if you traveled by ship, whether from Calcutta or Madras, you would first come to Rangoon, and then you would go to Penang, and then you would come down the Malay Peninsula, go around Singapore, and on to East Asia. So that was the route that had been followed. Liang Qiqiao warmly welcomed Tagore at a reception in Peking. But not everyone was as effusive as Liang in welcoming Tagore, and that was because the May 4th generation often misunderstood Tagore as somebody who advocated a kind of spirituality of the past, even though Tagore tried to establish or assert his modern credentials in his various speeches.